Yeah, no, God, I was earlier. Unfortunately, it was.
It was mid-December 2016 when Dave Wild, a long-time member and former chairman of the Derwent Valley Light Railway Society, asked me if I would take on the restoration of one of the original Derwent Valley Light Railway pump carts. Hi, my name's Alan Briggs and I'm a member of the Derwent Valley Light Railway Society, and this is the story of how I restored one of the original Derwent Valley Light Railway pump carts. Here you can see the wood that survives, and the pieces in the two bags at the right hand side are basically unrecognisable. Next we see the surviving metalwork, starting on the right with the four wheels, then the handle. Next to that is what originally I thought might be the connecting rod, but wasn't, and doesn't actually have anything to do with the pump cart. Next to that is the crown wheel, complete with crankshaft, and then the two axles. Unfortunately, parts of the wheels had been left in soil and had actually rotted away. Luckily, Tony Simons took them to college and got the students to repair them. Both axles were also bent, but luckily Tony got these straightened out. He also bought new bearings for the axles and turned the ends of the axles down to fit the new bearings. As well as all the original pieces of the pump cart, we also received this partly built new chassis. So Dave Wild and myself decided that we would lay it on the ground and then look at the original pieces and see if we could identify what they were and where they went in relationship to the chassis. Here we've identified two pieces which were originally one piece and was one of the main rails which were on the side where the brake mechanism was fitted. Here you can see the two brake block hangers which held the brake blocks, and here you can just see part of one of the original bearings for one of the axles, and here you can just see the end of the axle, and if you look across you'll see the axle underneath the framework. Now this is just the same area at a different angle looking down on that, and again you can see the two brake block hangers, and then in the middle of that you can see the bracket which actually holds the foot pedal, and then next to that you can see one of the original brake levers. Unfortunately, only one of those levers survives, so at some point we have to make a new one. Now this is the opposite side, again just part of the opposite main rail with the bearing, and this is the other part of the main rail, again with the bearing. Here we identified the two inner main rails. As you can see, only half of those main rails exist, but the halves that do contain the bearings which hold the crankshaft and crown wheel, and you can see there Dave Wild is just inspecting that. This is just another view of the crown wheel and crankshaft in its bearings. Here we're looking down the length of the chassis, and you can see that unfortunately there's a problem with the new chassis, because the inner two main rails have actually been set too wide apart. If you look at the original inner main rails which are supporting the crankshaft, you can see that they're a lot closer. So this will have to be something that will need to be rectified. Again, this is just a close-up of that same piece. Another problem is that the crown wheel is actually fouling on the two cross pieces at either side, and so a quick check on the plan and a count up of the cross pieces, I noticed that there were 6 cross pieces on the new chassis, whereas on the plan there are only 5. So again, this is something that will have to be rectified. Here I'm comparing the dimensions of the wood used to make the new chassis against the dimensions of the original wood, and unfortunately it was quite a bit smaller. So Dave and I looked at the 3 issues we have just found, and we decided that we would order new wood, and I would start making the chassis from scratch. On Wednesday the 3rd of May 2017, I met Craig Benton, a new member and volunteer at the railway. Craig had volunteered to take the metalwork to someone he knew for sandblasting, and would then take it back to his warehouse, where he would paint it with red oxide and top coat of black. Mid-afternoon on Wednesday the 17th of May, I took delivery of the wood and immediately checked to make sure everything was as ordered, which it was. Work started in earnest on the 18th of May, and here you can see the 4 main rails. They've had their ends cut to make the handles, and then they've all been rebaited to accept the cross pieces. Here you can see them just test fitted together before bolting. Here the outer main rails have all been bolted together, and the inner main rails have been placed with the crankshaft in position to ascertain their correct position before bolting. Here you can see the crown wheel and crankshaft in its bearings, which are not secured at this point. And here you can see that the axle and its bearings have been added, along with the pinion wheel. And here you can see that turning the crown wheel actually turns the pinion wheel, which in turn turns the axle. So this is the first time that the axle has actually been turned by the crown wheel in over 50 years. Here you can see that the main chassis is complete and the crown wheel and bearings have been fitted. Next I turned the chassis over so that I could work out the position of the drive axle and bearings, and this is just another view. Once the drive axle was fitted, I could measure from that to set the position of the other axle. Here the cart has been turned the right way up and the wheels fitted. Next I made one side of the gallows frame, and here you can see it clamped onto the chassis so that I could mark the correct angle for where it fits to the chassis. Here the other side of the gallows frame has been made, and it's all clamped together and test fitted. Here we see the gallows frame all screwed together and screwed to the chassis. Here I've placed the handle in its bearings on top of the gallows frame, ready to work out the position of the tie rods. Here you can see the vertical and the diagonal tie rods fitted. These give strength to the gallows frame. Whilst in at the railway today, Dave gave me a letter, and this letter is actually a letter from a Mr. Brian Slater, who was the actual guy who found the pump cart all those years ago. And this letter actually tells us in more detail of the story of the pump cart from when he found it. Now the letter is written to a Nick Beelby, who is a member of the Derwent Valley Light Railway Society and is also a member of the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, and I believe has some job with those. So I'll read the letter out because it gives a lot more information regarding the pump cart. And this is actually dated the 23rd of November 2012. Dear Nick, further to our quick natter the other week at the railway station, the remains of the DVLR pump trolley has been mouldering away down my garden for too many years now. I spotted the remains dumped in the cutting side at either Dunnington or Elvington in about 1970. It could have been from one of the Joe M trains running then, and I went back a few days later to look closer. It had been abandoned, presumably by the Peeway gang, and in subsequent burning off of the dead grass, most of the wooden superstructure has succumbed and was about 2/3 burnt away. However, the metal parts were relatively untouched. I decided to approach John Acklam, the general manager, about buying it. He was quite happy to let it go, and we agreed a price, £10, if I remember rightly. I might still have the receipt made out in Laythorpe office, somewhere in my chaotic filing system. I suppose my working at York HQ helped a bit as regards my bona fides. On getting the bits home, the heaviest are the wheels and axles, 100 weight each, and on further full inspection I noticed one of the wheel bearings had given way, no doubt the reason for its final abandonment. I purchased some ash spars with the intention of rebuilding it for possible use running on the Worth Valley. I was a regular volunteer there then. However, putting the proposal to Richard Greenwood, the main operating guy then, he said that it would be totally impracticable on the steepish gradients on the line, as the braking system as it stands is rudimentary in the extreme. I still have the ash spars somewhere buried in my garden shed. I am quite willing to let the DVLR have it, and any member of the current committee or whoever you decide is very welcome to come and have a look at the bits, now in my garage. If I remember rightly, you mentioned that 2 volunteers are involved with the Wickham trolley and that they could be interested. Sunday afternoons are best for me, perhaps in the next few weeks. Give me a ring, etc., etc. Brian Slater. So this is quite good information actually, and answers quite a number of questions that I've had, because I was wondering why so little of the original woodwork exists, and according to this we can see that it was burnt away in the burning off process of the grasses in the hedges. It also shows us that it's quite a lot older than I thought from the time when they got it, because this is now 2012. So that's sorry, not 2012. This was found in 1970, so that's 47, 48 years. And we know it was found either near Dunnington or Elvington. So the chances are it was one of the pump carts that was based at one of those stations. And we also know that he paid £10 for it. So this is good information in the provenance of the pump cart. So I'm very happy to have this, and I've already given Jonathan Stockwell a copy of this to go in the archives. So this is good stuff.